Hello.
Hi there. Hey, everyone. Love to know where people are calling in from. If you want to post that in the chat. I myself am in New Orleans, Louisiana, and it's very hot and humid right now.
And I'm currently located in North Carolina, so enjoying some of the sun, but am located normally just outside Toronto, Canada. So welcome everybody. Some people from Austin.
Nice.
Alberta, another
similar.
Canadian.
Okay, great. Looks like people are trickling in. You want to wait another few seconds, Katie, and then we can get started.
Yeah, sure. That sounds great.
India. Wow. Welcome.
Oh, late for you. 12:30-ish, 12 o'clock.
Yeah, definitely. All right, great. For people just joining, that was some quick math, Katie, by the way.
I have some coworkers in India as well. So.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Yeah, so we're going to get started in a few seconds. If you want to post where you're calling in from in the chat. And then we have a couple of questions we'll post during our conversation as well. All right, great. I think we're 2 minutes past. I think we're good to go, Katie. Do you want to kick off? I'll let you introduce yourself first, and then I'll give a brief intro as well.
Yeah, great, wonderful. Welcome, everybody. I'm Katie Jones. I'm the VP of Solutions and Enablement at PathFactory. So I lead our pre-sales solutions team, our enablement, sales enablement, and company enablement, and customer marketing teams at PathFactory. And for those of you who don't know what PathFactory is, a quick overview for you. So PathFactory is a content intelligence platform that allows you to generate personalized content experiences for individual buyers and buying groups. So if you think of it really about bringing the B2C expectations of Netflix and Amazon to the B2B world for content, and then pairing that with content intelligence, understanding the content, the engagement with that content, and then feeding that back to the go-to-market teams in order to action off of it from a marketing and sales perspective, to ultimately drive pipeline and velocity through your sales cycle is a quick overview of PathFactory for you. Thanks so much for having me.
Great. Thanks, Katie. And I'm Megan Walther. I'm the Director of Customer Success for Uniphore's Q for Sales product. Q for Sales is an EQ-based conversational intelligence platform for B2B revenue teams. So we join your video conferencing platform as an additional tool to give you insights during virtual meetings. Our team provides all of the post-sale customer support engagement with a focus on retention and expansion. And my background is in building and leading customer success teams for growth phase tech companies. So I'm really excited to be here today to discuss the topic of enabling teams for the new reality of building relationships virtually. So that's a little bit about me. And so, Katie, I have a few questions for you just to kick off the conversation. And just a little bit to, set the stage, provide the context of the conversation that Katie and I will be part of. We're really here today to discuss the shifts in buyer behavior and customer retention and how to enable revenue teams. For instance, we know that the skill set used to sell in person isn't the same as the skill set required to sell virtually via video conferencing tools. We also know that in sales, the human element is crucial to success. So with all this context for our discussion in mind, we want to look at the entire buyer journey, starting with the sales phase. So I'm going to start there with a few questions for you, Katie. And my first question is, My first question is, what are the biggest challenges you are seeing in sales enablement, particularly in regard to the shift to a more virtual selling space?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely hit the nail on the head when you mention that in-person selling and virtual selling are two different beasts. So I know it's been a big adjustment for a lot of salespeople, especially going through such a drastic change in the last few years and in what we've kind of experienced. So um, I think the biggest thing is those in-person cues that you were originally getting. You could really understand by somebody's body language or the actual in-person meeting. Those things are missing now. So we're really having to shift to digital cues to showcase that somebody's actually in a buying position. So really focusing on the data that matters, and it's very interesting too in the shift that we've seen, where we went from not having a whole lot of data to actually shifting to having so much data and inundating people with data. And you look at somebody's Salesforce, and they have 6 different tabs with different tools, with different intent data scores, and all of these things. It's really trying to narrow down what are those really true first party buying signals that matter, and putting it in a language that our salespeople understand. I think is definitely something that we've really focused on, is translating the data that you're receiving. How do you prioritize that? And then how do you actually understand what it means? And we obviously use our own tool a lot for that. Understanding the content engagement is a main first party buying signal that we're utilizing across our sales team to understand, are people engaging with content, with your content, and they're interested in it? Where is it within the funnel? And then showcasing that education journey throughout to focus on the right buyers.
Yeah, so true. I think you're, really resonated with that point of there's just so much data out there. So how do you focus on the right data, right? And then, my next question, just to expand a little bit about what you were saying is, what are you seeing as some of the needs for sellers today to ensure that they meet the customers where they are? You talked a little bit about that journey and the
Yeah.
data piece. What else can sellers do to ensure that they're really meeting customers, where they are?
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, because buyers now and consumers want personalized journeys. They want everything to be personal and ready for them, make it really easy for them to find the information they need. And this is thanks to services like Amazon and Netflix and Spotify that know who you are and know what you're looking at, and make it really easy for you to find the next thing for you to purchase or to watch or to read. Um, but the other problem is that buyers don't want to tell you anything about them. So they want to look through information. They don't want to fill out forms. They don't want to tell you who they are. They don't want to give you their phone number, because they don't want people calling. So it's a very fine line of providing this personalized experience and what digital cues that people can pick up on, without having to ask for every piece of information about that individual. And some tools out there obviously make that a little bit easier, like Sixth Sense and Demand Base, and those more of those intent tools to give you some indications. But looking at that digital buying behavior, to ensure that you're understanding what they're actually looking at, what they're interested in, and then targeting your talk track or your pitch to that specific thing, and really focusing in on that pain point. And I think the key in order to enable sales, in order to do that, is really having that alignment with marketing. So understanding what marketing's doing from a campaign perspective, but then what is the response from that buyer in those different campaigns, and then what can that tell you? What are the topics or the information that they're engaging with through their own education journey? And then how can you kind of pick that up in that one-to-one relationship from the sales perspective?
Yeah, yeah, that's great. And yeah, you're so right. It's such a coordinated effort, right? Of sales enablement, and marketing, and that coordination piece is so crucial. Um, how have you seen the content that someone consumes, impact the experience in the sales cycle and even post sales?
Yeah, I think the insights there are really interesting, and I'll try. Just saw a comment in the chat that I'm speaking really fast, so I'll try and slow down. I have been told that I talk fast. So thanks for the note. Um, So we've really seen that content engagement is very indicative of sales readiness. So not only what are the types of content that people are engaging with and the topics that they're engaging with, but where does it fall in that funnel stage? And typically, a lot of these intent providers can showcase, okay, they're looking around the entire, world wide web looking for information. It's putting them in a decision stage. But what are they actually engaging with your brand? And then what does the buying committee look like, that's also engaging with those different pieces of content? And are people sharing that? I think sharing is a huge first party buying signal, of content. If I'm going to share something with you, not only am I going to, do I think it's interesting enough to share, but I'm also putting myself out there a little bit to say that I think that this piece of content is very interesting. This is something that could be engaging for our business. It's putting your reputation a little bit on the line there. So if you're willing to share that with your coworkers, with people that are making a decision with you, that's a pretty good indication of interest. And I think that really translates into the post sales side. And Megan, I'm curious, kind of your view on this from a post sales perspective, especially when it comes to not only retention, but adoption of a product. So we see a lot, if people are reading our blogs, if they're reading our content, even reading our information in our knowledge base, typically they're a more engaged customer because they're spending the time to try and educate themselves on how to utilize the software that we're providing, or to pick up on trends, and understand how to shift their go-to-market strategy, in conjunction with our tool, and that typically equals adoption. So I do
Yeah.
feel that there is a coordination there, but I'm curious from your perspective if you feel that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think that education piece is so important, and having that, recognition or understanding of what the product does ahead of time until they get to customer success, just helps us during the onboarding process and ultimately with adoption that leads to retention, renewal, expansion. So I think that education piece is really key. Just if someone has an understanding of your value in the market and what you can provide and how it aligns to their particular pain point. And often, we're working with larger enterprise customers, maybe the key stakeholders, the decision makers really understand that when you get to the user, they don't have this is new to them. They're not part of that initial journey. But I think if you have an understanding or working really closely with sales enablement and understand the content that's out there and how it
Mhm.
does resonate with the end user, that's just going to improve your ability to have those users adopt, and then retain those users, and then ultimately renew and expand that customer.
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually interesting because the alignment between even post sales and marketing, like who knows all the content that's created and what it's about. It's so hard to keep a pulse
Right.
on what that is, let alone what the content actually entails. So, I mean, the alignment across the company in that way is super important as well.
Yeah. Yes, I completely agree. Um, you touched on the content piece, the data piece. I loved what you said about how when people are sharing or how they're actually using the content. That's a big piece of the data that you're looking at, I'm
Mhm.
sure. Um, I want to talk a little bit about what some recommendations for sellers once they actually then get in touch with the buyer. According to Gartner, B2B buyers spend only 17% of the total journey with sales reps. So you really have to make the most of the conversations once you do engage with your buyers. So what are some of your recommendations to sellers to make the most of their time with buyers? What skills are required now given the shift to virtual engagements?
Mhm. Yeah, I think definitely a preparation is key. So understanding what have they done up to this point in order to target, um, or to craft your story in a way that addresses what they've been researching. So you can discover what you think their pain is really important. And you mentioned it in the last question around addressing the pain points. That's the biggest thing. If if you're not listening in those initial conversations and uncovering what they actually feel is their pain, um, or that compelling piece that they really need to solve them as an individual. I go to this back to this with my sales team a lot. We're not just selling to companies. You're selling to a person, and that person has a job to do. And that person is
Right.
working at a company with a goal. And they're more important. That person as an individual and the problem that they're trying to solve is more important than trying to look at it as an account, as a full massive account. That's really where you have to start as the individual. And I think the key is, I mean, preparation is a huge piece, but just listening, making sure that you understand
Hmm.
what that pain is, and then addressing it as quickly and to the point as possible. I feel that we get so convoluted, even in my in your opening pitch of what you're talking about. If you make it too complicated, you'll lose people. So getting to the point quickly based on what you've heard is really important, and then making sure that you follow through. I don't think there's anything more frustrating as a buyer than having to repeat yourself and coming to something where
Hmm.
people haven't prepared based on what they said that they were going to do. And then you're kind of sitting there like, okay, well, I've just wasted more time with you. Then you're going to start looking
Yep.
elsewhere.
Yep. I completely agree with that. By the way, I did post a question in the Q&A, if anyone wants to respond to that, as we're chatting. But just in terms of that specific customer need or use case, I completely agree. You need to solve that specific pain point, and then you can expand from there, right?
Mhm.
But you need to start with, are you meeting a specific need? And then you can transition to, how do you fit into their entire business to solve their larger pain points or fit into their larger strategy. But you have to start with that specific need, and then build. I
Right.
completely agree with that.
Yeah.
Um, Great. And so, we talked about the sales process. We talked a little bit about your recommendation in terms of, sales enablement, coordinating with marketing. I do think a really key part of the buyer journey as well is then the handoff process, right? So once you've gone from sales to then customer success, so shifting to that part of the buyer journey, where do you see deals break down, and how do you combat against this?
Yeah, I think it goes back again to the listening and understanding what the pain point of the prospect is that's now become your customer, and communicating that internally to your teams. So we've seen a lot of success internally by having a little small tiger team come together with your sales, your account executive, your pre-sales engineer, your post-sales engineer, your implementation specialist, and your customer success manager before any um, new account comes on board, and you have a full debrief of what did you hear in the sales cycle, what have you communicated in order to help, especially in those first projects. I think, to your point around focusing on that pain, and then you can expand outwards. You need to build the trust with the customer first, that you can solve their immediate issue, and then you can figure out, okay, well, how else can we help you. But building that trust by saying, I understood what you told me in the sales cycle, and I'm communicating that to the rest of my team in order for them to just pick it up and run with it. So again, you don't have to re-explain yourself and kind of repeat yourself. They're understanding the information that was gathered. But with you guys doing it firsthand, I'm curious what you've seen work for your side.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, at first, I think it's also a mindset that customer success is sales. It's part of the same sales org, right? So having those same expectations at the beginning is crucial, because post sales is really an extension of the entire sales process. I know we've seen statistics and studies such as retaining customers is 7 times less expensive than acquiring them, right? So that's why this focus and this handoff is so important to really set the stage, for a successful relationship with customer success. And that really is the beginning of your relationship with them from a CS perspective. And I love what you said, because that's definitely my recommendation as well, is making sure you're checking the box of first having an internal handoff every single time you, sign a new customer. And my preference is having that call, whether it's, sales lead, CSM, anyone else in your team who needs to be involved, depending on your business, to actually jumping on a quick call and going through those items. It doesn't have to be a long meeting, but it allows you the time to ask those important questions. Systems are also really helpful, right? If you have a tool you can use to automate the handoff process, such as you can't move the deal to the next opportunity stage without certain information in place,
Yeah.
that's great. Or the use of a conversation intelligence tool to review previous meetings. We use our own platform, Q for Sales, to do just that. So I can quickly go in, review past meetings, and understand everything that was discussed to really set up the relationship for success. And then the last thing I'll mention is when you do the handoff with the customer, make it really clear who is responsible for what in terms of clear roles and responsibilities. And also make it clear during the kickoff, if you are the customer success manager taking over, that you have a full understanding of what has been discussed previously. So they're not going to be required to repeat themselves, something that you touched on earlier, Katie. Just provides you that level of credibility that they're in good hands. They've just spent all this time with the sales team and built trust and explaining their pain points. So it's really crucial for them to trust you that you can fulfill the value promised. And knowing that our time is limited with our buyers and customers, being prepared will allow you to optimize that time with them, and so they don't have to do another round of discovery. So just being organized and really valuing that time, and again having that handoff in place before is really going to set you up for success.
Yeah, I think that totally makes sense. It is an interesting situation. I don't know if you come across it at all, where sometimes the sales cycle you're talking to different people. The decision maker is not necessarily the user, so you can
Right.
understand a lot of stuff within the sales cycle, and then you do the handover, and then you start your onboarding with your customer, and they don't really know a whole lot about your tool, and you
Yep.
have to then do a little bit of internal selling again to try and
Yep.
get them up to
Yep.
speed on what you do, what your value is, how you can help them. So I don't know if you guys find that too, but I think that's a very important part of like that value piece there.
That happens so often. It happens all the time, right? And so I think that's going back to the internal handoff piece. Really understand who are the people that you're going to be interacting with, right? Who have you talked to? Who have you been working with in terms of the deal cycle? Who will you be training? What does that group look like? And then that allows you to really plan, okay, how are we going to approach this? Do we have to basically start from square one, or do they have an understanding of our solution? Are they already bought in? Because you're right, oftentimes the decision makers bought in, but the end user who you really have to
Yeah.
win over and start from square one. So I do think having a really organized internal handoff process does help combat that and make you really prepared, when you're going into the engagement.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And then I love this conversation. I could talk about handoff processes all day, but so I'll post another question in chat too. Just what have you guys seen be successful in terms of the sales to customer success handoff process? Um, any other recommendations regarding how to best collaborate with colleagues when handing over a deal, or do you want to move on to the success and retention piece, Katie?
Yeah, I think, like, the only other thing when you were talking about it is really the tools and the utilization of, like, different stages within, like, the CRM that you're using, making sure information is filled out. I think having, one place, that you store all of that information, not only for the handover, but if you have a new CSM that comes in 6 months later and you have to switch over the account ownership, or you have a new decision maker that comes into that account, having that one source of truth, I think, is very helpful, not only for the account executive as they kind of nurture that relationship with the decision maker, but then also the CSM team or the CS team in general, to really have that place to go back to and have all that information. I think is super important.
Yep, I completely agree with that, Katie.
Um, as we Should we move into the customer success and retention stuff, or should we look at the Q&A? We're getting some. We do have a question from Willie. Any thoughts on growing revenue in a usage-based model where onboarding is just the beginning?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I do think that onboarding is still very important, but I think, you have to adapt your engagement model to, whatever is driving revenue for your business, right? So, but onboarding is still a big part of that, right? And it's something I think is really the start of, you know, the relationship with customer success that will lead ultimately to retention and expansion is what is that initial, aha moment that really proves the value for the user. So depending on what your solution is, that might be something that CS is showing them, or it might be product based, right? So, usage based model might be more product led. But how can you also work with your product team to really identify those moments in your product as people start to use it more and more? And how does that support your engagement model? So maybe it's more product led versus CS led, but it's all kind of collaborating on the same thing in terms of what does success look like for your users, and what are those moments that are going to keep them coming back for more and really continue to realize that value for them.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and what are the tools that you can use in order to like software that you can use in order to showcase if people are using it? I know we have forget a customer health score that we look at platform usage and customer engagements and these different data points to allow a customer health score that makes it very easy for the entire company, anybody who goes into Salesforce, to understand the health of a customer, because at the end of the
Yeah,
day, customer success doesn't own the customer. The entire company owns the customer, right?
right.
Everybody needs to partner together, including product. And what are those different engagements that you can kind of bring in order to drive that adoption and retention? I know internally we do a lot of quarterly business reviews, so we really try to
Mhm.
bring the success of the user to anybody really in that organization that we think is applicable to, including the decision makers, the C-level suite. So not only can we highlight that you're getting value from the tool, but also showcase the people, the champions at those companies, and saying like, this is what they're doing, and they're doing an amazing job, and really highlighting that as well. I think is helpful for building those relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. And, I think that, something you touched on was the customer health score, which I wanted to expand on that a little bit as well, because I think that is so key to driving successful relationships and engagements with your customers that will ultimately lead to revenue growth, right? Um, you know, you mentioned there's a lot of platforms that will do this, automatically, a lot of systems that will allow you to create customer health scores. But the reason why it's so important is it's because it's a more proactive view of your customers versus reactive. Feedback like NPS and CSAT scores are important and really table stakes for getting feedback from your customers, but they're often lagging indicators, right? So you really want to create a model and a customer success support that is more proactive to determine, you know, what customers are at risk long before you get to that renewal conversation. The last thing you want to know, what want to happen is be surprised when your customer's coming up for renewal, and then you realize, okay, they haven't been happy for a long time. Because then if you have those proactive measures and you can just segment them as easily as, happy, neutral, at risk, you can create those playbooks to intervene ahead of time. And even if you are, a smaller company, you don't have the ability to purchase software, you can still create, these models, these health score models yourself. And what I'd recommend doing is just looking at your top customers, your advocates, your highest growth customers. What are they doing? And then create your model from that. So looking at inputs such as, how are they using your product? How often are you talking to them? Tickets that they're sending in. So kind of looking at all these different touch points, and then building a model based on those inputs. And you can start simple, right? You can just start with a couple and say, okay, what are some things that we want to measure regarding our customers? And you can do a little bit of trial and error, but just starting even there is, an easy way to really get a pulse on your customers, and again, be able to intervene um, much, earlier in the process. So I think that's just a really important aspect of customer success is, obviously looking at the data, but also intervening ahead of time to really be successful.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And kind of leading in off of that, I think based on the current economic conditions, it's common right now for customers or
Hmm.
for companies to be focusing on that retention model and retaining customers rather than so much focus on net new business. So what are other tactics in addition to your health score that you're exploring this year to really focus on that retention and renewals?
Yeah, I think just we talked about kind of having that data in place. That's such a key aspect of it. Looking at your customers, understanding how you're doing overall in terms of your book of business. But I'd also say that adding customer appreciation into your engagement model is now more important than ever. What are the small ways you can reward your customers and demonstrate your appreciation for their business? Like, look at the different milestones, such as a renewal. That's an easy one. But how can you demonstrate your appreciation in creative ways? It doesn't have to be something super expensive. It could be something as small as a handwritten note, right? Just something that you're just really demonstrating you appreciate their business. Having empathy, it's been a hard few years for everyone. The current market is adding that additional layer of stress. So understanding, what your customers are going through as well and taking that moment to really appreciate their business is so important right now, I would say. And then the other thing that I think is, that we're looking at that I would recommend is longer term contracts as well, right? It's something that's even more important given the economic conditions. Everyone's looking at their tech stacks right now to see where they can reduce their spend. If budget's really a concern, look at the terms. Can you offer a discount for a multi-year deal? That will help combat churn and also help them if they are having budget constraints. I mean, of course, you have to look at your own business model, what discounts make sense, but that's another tactic I would recommend, given what we're facing right now.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Actually, we've also just really adopted that recently um, with the multi-year deals, trying to push those. It takes also, not only is it nice that you can give a bit of a discount and you have more time to build that value with the customer, but it also takes the pressure off of you, off your CS team to renew that customer, and then off of your
Right.
customer to be stressed about the renewal and proving. Of course, they want to be proving value, but going back to, I mean, I don't know how many times I've gone back to my CFO, and they're the hardest people to negotiate with in your company. So,
Right.
and for good reason. But if you can extend that engagement, I mean, it's really great for everyone. I also love what you said about the handwritten note is great and just having empathy. I don't think I'll ever forget. Um, I was working with a vendor and I felt sick. And I think I had the flu or something. So I had to cancel our biweekly touch base and just mention, I'm off sick. And my CSM sent me a $25 Uber Eats gift card and just
Yep.
said, feel better. And it's such a small thing, but it's stuck with me
Right.
for years now. And it was like,
Right.
it was so welcomed. Like I didn't have to think about dinner that night. Not that I was eating, but I got my daughter food, with the Uber Eats gift. I was so touched because she had empathy,
Yep.
and it was such a small thing to just again realize that the people that you're working with, they're humans. They're other people.
Yep.
They have families. They have lives. They have stresses. So how can you connect with people and support them and lift them up as an individual? I think is so important.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. I love that example. That's such a great example, and yeah, such an easy thing that we can do to build connection and build
Yeah.
relationships with our customers, because that's really what it's all about, is building relationships, right?
Yeah.
So that's such an easy win.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've discussed the sales phase and the handover process a lot. We're kind of getting into that retention, but how do you continue to build the trust with your customers to the post sales to really drive revenue at the end of the day?
Yeah, so I think it's of course continuing to engage with a variety of stakeholders, right? So we talked about you might have the relationship with the decision maker, but also understanding the needs of the different stakeholders you're working with. So there are different people once you get into the post-sales phase who are going to be just to really influencing those renewal and expansion decisions. So identifying those champions who are influencing other users, building relationships with them, and learning as much as you can from them. And then also just really meeting them where they are, right? So we talked about that during the pre-sales phase, but ask them what is their preferred communication style. It's like as simple as that. This is a question we ask our customers, and one recent example, we recently had one of our key stakeholders for an account. She admitted she's just overwhelmed by the number of emails she gets. So we switched to a shared Slack channel with her, and we had done it with some of our users that we had been training, and saw because that's what they use for their internal communication message. And once we did that, we saw an immediate improvement in her engagement. So I think that's one easy way to just, again, talking about the empathy and understanding, and meeting your customers where you are as you're building those relationships. And then also, I think just understanding the bigger picture and where your solution fits in to your customer's larger strategy. To them, you are one small piece of the puzzle, right? So it's your whole job, but to them, you might start off as just one piece of the puzzle for them, and they might have purchased their solution for one specific need or pain point. So the more that you can understand about their overall business, their overall strategy, and prove your value, against that overall strategy and how your solution supports that strategy, it makes the expansion conversations much easier. So just as much as you can understand and connect with them on a personal level, but also understand their bigger role within the organization and what is their business overall strategy. That's just a way, if you can provide value there, it's just going to make expansion that much easier.
Yes. Yeah, we've seen that a lot in the last few quarters. We've been trying to have more of those strategic alignment conversations, and just like the first question is, what are your goals for the year, and
Right.
how can we support you? What are your goals? Where do we fit in? And then allowing them to provide the direction of where they're trying to go as a company, and then you really saying, okay, well, these are the places that I can fit in, and this is how I can
Yep.
support you to achieve that goal. And we've found a lot of success there. I do think it's important to get that executive alignment as
Yep.
well, ensuring that you are having those relationships a little bit higher up than the user to build the trust in order to understand the strategic alignment. I think is super important too. But yeah, I totally agree with everything you just said. Makes it a lot
Yep.
easier.
And you're probably not going to have that conversation day one, right? Or you're not going to have that conversation day one. That all goes with the building trust and developing those relationships, executive alignment. I completely agree with that. And once you build that trust, then you can have those conversations and continue to add value.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious, when you're looking for your success team and supporting customers, as we're shifting to an increased number of virtual engagements, like what skills are important in order to be successful?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think we touched on this earlier, but just being organized and setting clear expectations during each and every call. If you can reduce the number of calls required for your key stakeholders, for your users you're engaging with, again, we know the attention of buyers and customers is harder than ever to come by. So just being able to set clear expectations, being able to optimize your time, and someone who's really organized is really key. I also think you should you know, engage as you would on an in-person call. It's so easy to multitask while you're on these video calls, right? But really, be present on the call. Also be on video. It's such an it's such an easy thing. Just be on video. Don't join a call off video. Be on video. We find, on the Q for Sales team, when we turn on our video, our customers naturally want to turn on their video as well. So that's just a really easy tactic, and I think it's just so important and should even be stated. But also just as part of that engagement, pause to ask questions. I think that's even more important when you're virtually, especially if you're with a really big group. And being okay with pausing, even if it feels awkward at a time. People are naturally going to fill that in, and I think even virtually, it's harder to do that because we're just these boxes on a screen. But also, engaging people, calling them out by name. So I would just say, in addition to, being organized, optimizing the time, but also really trying to engage with it as you would an in-person conversation is so important.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when we were back in the office before COVID happened, I hated being on video. I would never be on video. It made me so uncomfortable. And then
Yeah,
once we went fully virtual, my whole team has to be on video whenever we meet. It makes me uncomfortable if people
yeah,
aren't on video,
yeah,
especially internal meetings. And we suggest the same thing. Always be the first one to put your video on. And honestly, if you're the only one with your video on, keep it on. At least they can see you and learn your body language and understand you a little bit more.
yeah,
And also, it kind of brings the human element back into it, where who knows what's going on in the background. Like, I'm in a hotel room right now, but normally, I have a dog running around, or the
yeah.
doorbell's ringing, or my 2-year-old's home with a fever or something, and people get to know you as an individual. And again, it increases that
Completely agree.
empathy and a relationship, just for a simple thing to turn your video on. Such a
Yep,
big impact for sure.
yep.
Um,
Completely agree.
so as this growth and innovation is coming, how do you combat functional silos when supporting customer growth?
Yeah, so I think starting with a shared knowledge base or system like a CRM where you're documenting everything is step one, right? And having that documentation visible to all parties is just the easiest way to break down functional silos. So, if I have all of my handoff information in CRM, all of my customer communications in my CRM, it just makes it really easy and transparent across departments. For instance, marketing can reference it for possible case studies. Just insurance assures, excuse me, alignment across the board. I also think you can do it from a system perspective, but also a process perspective, right? So, creating a process allows your team to sync regularly and share information. So, on our team, on the Q for Sales team, we have a regular weekly pipeline review with our smaller sales org. Um, but we also have a monthly pipeline review that includes other important stakeholders, such as marketing and even members from R&D, to give them clear line of sight what is coming, but also what we're hearing from our prospective buyers. So I would say both from a system perspective and a process perspective, you can really put a lot in place to break down those functional silos.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I know, and I think it's the right technology, the right tools, because you're inundated with so much data that the
Right.
alignment across the organization, the more systems that you have, sometimes it actually hinders that alignment. But utilizing the right systems and the right ways to communicate, I think is super important. Like you mentioned, even Slack with one of your customers, and that's her preferred method.
Hmm.
Internally, I am so much more a Slack. Like, I'll respond way faster if you Slack me than if you're waiting
Right.
for me to respond to an email. So understanding even internally how you
Yep.
function, are the people in the group the right people to be there, um, and how are you communicating? I think is super important for those, to eliminate the silos as much as possible.
Yep. I completely agree. Um,
Wonderful.
well, I know we're probably wrapping up on time. I really enjoyed this conversation, Katie. I wanted to ask, do you have any final thoughts as we wrap up this discussion?
No, I mean, I think it's been great talking with you. So thank you so much for having me. I could talk about this stuff for hours, but yeah, I think the biggest thing for us is just utilizing the right technology and the right data. That I think that's the hardest part for us, kind of being inundated with all of these different data sources and trying to manage our way through them. It's just important to focus on the data that matters, and I think that's our biggest learning in the last few months.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. And I would just add that, to reiterate some of what we've also talked about, systems are so important, but also, sales is really all about relationships, right? And you've mentioned it a few times, but our buyers and customers, they're people, right? So I think being prepared and organized to optimize your time with them, respect their time, but also, again, I just want to say it one more time, just having empathy, ask them how they're doing, understanding what they're going through in their personal life, taking that extra effort is really now more than ever, I just think so important.
Totally agree. Yeah.
All right, great. I think we've answered I think we're good on questions. So with that, I just want to say, Katie, thank you so much for your time. It's been a wonderful conversation, and yeah, leave it at there.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It was wonderful to chat with you.
All right. Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Bye.